Juany, you have a really interesting program that you started at Dallas ISD. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your program, sort of what prompted Dallas ISD to start it, and sort of a little bit more about it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Bing. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here with you today. So yeah, back in 2016, our Board of Trustees amended one of our policies to include SEL as a required practice. So it was originally written into policy that we would be teaching SEL skills around the 5 competencies that align with the CASEL framework. CASEL is the Collaborative for Academic, Social, Emotional Learning. So those competencies are around self-awareness, self-management, healthy relationship skills, social awareness, and responsible decision-making. And so it was decided that by 2025, all campuses, all classrooms, all grade levels would be teaching these skills. And so at that time, we didn't have a department. We had a policy. And so we started exploring and learning more about what it meant to embed SEL, in all of our classrooms, and what did this mean for the district. So we started visiting other districts, and we started with Cleveland and with Austin, knowing that they had, several years ahead of us in this practice. And so we went out to observe, to learn what they were doing. And I'll tell you that our biggest takeaway, we always share this because it was really helpful. Our biggest takeaway when we went to those visits was, okay, so if you were to start over, like, where do we start now? What would you do differently? And their response was, we would start with the adults. So we wouldn't have started with a curricular resource coming in to teach the students. The adults have to understand it first. The adults have to be able to embody it and practice it, so that they are modeling what they will be teaching to students. And so that's where we started. And I'll tell you, we're still learning, and we're still, evolving around this work. But it is critical that we had the opportunity to really focus on adult acquisition of SEL first. And we had that support by having it written into policy.
Great. So Juany, I'll ask you the question that you asked them. What have you learned since starting this, and what would you do if you were starting again?
Goodness, yeah. So I've learned that it's not, it doesn't happen overnight, and it's different from campus to campus, and actually also just from person to person, right? And so you have to get the buy-in, and you have to connect with people's why in order to get that buy-in. And so really developing relationships, spending the time on relationships and connecting with people so that we all are reminded, like, why is this important? These are long-term, lifetime skills that our students need. But whenever we as adults are not practicing competencies such as self-awareness and recognizing our own actions and biases and thoughts and beliefs and how they impact others and our decisions, then we can't teach it, right? And so just focusing really, it takes time. And for some, it takes longer, but we have to be patient, because that's the nature of working with people. And, adults and kids, we're all, it takes us time to learn these competencies. And it also helps us to realize, or to be reminded why we're here, and, who's in the right position and who isn't.
Great, perfect. Josie, I know that you were very interested in I assume Waco's a little smaller than Dallas ISD, can you tell us a little bit about what prompted your school district to sort of say, we need something like this, and where you've been since that?
Yes. So first of all, good morning, everyone. It's great to see everyone again. But what prompted us, some people could say it was the pandemic, but I think I think that our employees who struggle, whether it's physically, mentally, or financially, and that causes the stress in the workplace, I think is prevalent, whether there's a pandemic or not. I think the pandemic exacerbated the situation. So anecdotally, I can tell you on average, we were losing 1 to 2 teachers a week, and I'd talk to every single one of them. And I learned that many of them, it was connected to, and we call it social emotional health. So I would say it was connected to one of those areas with their social emotional health. And I continue to deal with employees who have some concerns, and I feel like I don't have all the resources. I could give them, I can give them resources, but I feel like we need to be more proactive rather than reactive. So that led me to, and especially after I saw Juany and her team, I was learning about what they were doing. And then I thought, you know what, that's it. We're going to have to do more about this. And what we did is in the middle of the year, about January, we launched, we created a stakeholder committee. It had school leaders, teachers, counselors. So it's really a committee that created buy-in to get this work started. And just like Juany said, we have not done the policy yet, but that's coming. We have done our visioning. We've done our why. We've done a soft launch and implemented some strategies already. And I'm really excited to say we just hired a couple of SEL coordinators to help us do this work. Only one of those SEL coordinators will be helping us in the HR department, but I'm just excited to have that extra support. So really excited about that. And, but really the why is around, we know through the research that, that if we focus on SEL for adults, it's going to have positive impact outcomes for students. And that's why we exist, is to do great things, help our kids do great things. And we know that, just a couple little points with that, we know that teachers who develop their own SEL skills, they're not only improving their own well-being, but they're also improving the SEL of their students, which is what Juany was talking about, like tackling the adults first versus tackling the student side first. And then also, we also know that when adults can regulate their own emotions, it's less likely to result in burnout. And I'll tell you, Waco's had one of the highest turnover rates in the state. We were like at 27% just a few years ago. So we're really working on reducing that. So just really excited about this work. It's just important work. And a big thing that I've already learned that has been super helpful is have thought partners like Dallas ISD and other people who are doing this work, because there's no point in reinventing the wheel when folks already have this work moving along.
Great. Thank you, Josie. And one of the things that you sort of, built upon is that, Juany really talked about it's important to sort of begin with those who are going to, educators are taking care of students. So therefore begin with the students, but you also are building, you're allowing your educators to begin to build your program. So therefore allowing them to structure it as they see they need. And that's also probably really, really critical for you.
Absolutely.
Great. And Juany, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the components of your program and what your outcomes have been so far.
Yeah, so when we talk about SEL in Dallas, we have 4 approaches that we talk about, or where we integrate SEL. We think of it as this is something that's comprehensive, it's ubiquitous, it lives throughout the entire day, and it's not just a one practice that happens when students walk in the building. So the 4 approaches are centered around dedicating time weekly to teach lessons explicitly. So 45 minutes of explicit instruction around SEL, developing this skill set. And so the way that looks, it might be 10 or 15 minutes a day spread out over the course of the week. This year this was the first year as a result of COVID, which really helped us in this way. We built an advisory period into every secondary campus. And so making that time available to teach these lessons explicitly. So, and in elementary schools, we have morning meetings where we use that time to teach these skills. The next component is how SEL is integrated into the climate and culture. So we do have some signature practices. These are kind of like the foundation, and these practices apply to like any meetings, any trainings, just the way classes run, the way students enter and exit a building. And those practices are always starting with a welcoming opening to allow time and opportunities to build relationships, connect, get to know each other. And then have engaging practices throughout, whether that means, throughout a meeting or a PD session or throughout the day, just making sure that everyone is involved, that there's opportunities for engagement. And then that you're always closing with an optimistic closing, giving people an opportunity to reflect on that day or meeting or session and looking, having something to look forward to that they're taking from that experience. But then also integrating it through your systems and practices like your behavior. In Dallas right now, one of those big district efforts that we're looking at is our discipline systems, removing or doing away with out of school suspensions for level 1 and level 2 behaviors, and looking at how SEL aligns to this effort. So looking at those systems and how do we develop these skills for, within our students whenever we're addressing behavior systems. And so we're thinking of things like, really bringing in the calming practices, helping students just kind of self-manage whenever they are in a heated situation. So really just trying to align the opportunity to develop these skills to existing systems and just kind of thinking about it as an integrated approach as opposed to something separate. And then also looking at how do we make connections with the content that we're teaching. So that's a third approach, is looking at content integration with our SEL standards. We developed a 1-page set of standards that are pre-K through adult, because these standards we feel like apply to everyone. And so it's making connections with the content that's being taught, regardless of the content, if it makes sense. We're not trying to force it, but we are asking our curriculum writers in our teaching and learning department, as we're developing lesson exemplars, to make that SEL connection so that when teachers are doing their lesson plans, we have these exemplars, but teachers are also making those connections and thinking about, whether it's a task that they're using to provide students with the opportunity, for example, to focus on healthy relationship skills, or it's just content. It's related to it connects to the content. So it might be looking at characters in a story and identifying, how a character maybe practice self-management in this situation that the character was engaged in. So just making the connection specifically with the content and or within the tasks. And then the fourth component is the partnership with the parents, and really providing parents with tools and practices that they can use at home. This is the first year that we started that through parent discussion, a parent discussion series. We've also just provided mini sessions to parents on like tips to use at home. When COVID hit last spring, a lot of parents started reaching out about, how can I help my child? They're stressed out, or they seem depressed, or I can't seem to get them motivated. And so we started hosting sessions and providing resources on our district at home resource site with just activities that they could do at home to help with these, develop these skills.
And so what I hear you saying is the 4 components of this. Is one is a commitment, a weekly commitment. 2 is a change in culture in the ways that you begin and end things. 3 is a connection to content, that you're integrating everything. And then 4 is collaborating with parents and others that will also support this. So it's a really sort of a holistic approach.
Absolutely.
Great. And what have some of been your outcomes? Have you been able to measure those?
Yeah, so originally what we did, because we're data rich, right? We have all kinds of data. So we have STAR achievement data, we have benchmark data, we have, common assessment data. So we already have this data. And then we also have, our district facilitates climate and culture surveys throughout the year. We have student experience surveys. So originally we started by looking at all of this data and trying to see if we could see evidence of change at those schools that were consistently implementing SEL. This year, for the first time, we administered the SEL survey by Panorama, and that was helpful in getting specific feedback from our students about how they felt around supportive relationships. Did they feel like they had supportive relationships from staff at school, and was there someone at home too that they felt like they could talk to, around self-efficacy, self-management, and social awareness. And so what was really nice was just to hear from our students, because a lot of times as adults, we kind of assume based on what we know about kids, but it's always nice to hear directly from them. One of the things that we're going through right now too is empathy interview training. And that's just been really helpful, just to talk to the kids, talk to the parents, talk to staff, to really get anecdotal feedback from them about how things are going, what's different, what's working, what's not working.
Great. And just trying to get a sense, you mentioned that you were getting this feedback. Has it been working in the ways you expected?
It's been helpful to help us really just kind of, it helps us think about the plans that we put in place for our students and for our schools, so that we're not just kind of developing these plans based on what we think, is best for our schools, but really utilizing their feedback on, this is what I need right now. And that's what makes a difference, right? If we're giving timely support, not based on what our kids and our staff and our community are asking for, not based on what we think, like, this is part of the plan, this is where we're going, but it really has to align to what they need in order to be able to impact change.
Great. And Josie, are there components that they're doing that you are using, or in what ways are you modifying these things?
Yeah, so right now, like, we're just launching, we're just emerging. Like I said, we have monthly meetings, so we've only had like a handful of meetings. Our big goal, because I'm just going to be honest with you, if you have a big vision to do something great, because this isn't your usual. I know Juany's talking a lot about the student aspect, and then I'm the HR person, so I'm going to talk a lot about the employee aspect of this. We're collaborating with our support services department. So this is two major district departments coming together to do this work. So we're going to have now that we have two SEL coordinators, we're going to have that student aspect, but that one of those SEL coordinators will be part-time with us in HR doing the employee aspect. And at this point, we're still in the design phase, because all we've done was a soft launch with some strategies, because our big theme this year has been belonging. So we've presented some strategies to principals to help employees feel like they belong. And we do a lot of empathy interviews. So that's been going on, I would say, in our district for about a couple of years now. And so no, we do not have a framework yet. That's why we're bringing on some experts to really help do this work, because it's important work, but it's going to need to be someone who can really commit that time to building all of this out, which is why we're bringing on some extra folks.
Perfect. Great. Why don't we take some questions from our leaders here? I know Sherry had a question. Sherry, you want to ask yours? Or I'm happy to also ask it as well.
Yes, I was wondering if getting this started, we did an advisory time a couple of years ago at our high school, but one of the pushbacks from teachers was the support for lessons. And so how did you go about providing that kind of support for this work?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, we don't have a big budget for SEL. So we have, we operate off of grants. So Title II and Title IV is how we fund our staff primarily. And so we don't really have extra funding for resources. We do have a foundational grant that supports like a very small set of schools that are involved in a study. But so what we're using as a district is free resources, resources that are made available to everyone. And there's a few reasons. One, because we don't have money to purchase a program for everyone, but another, because we don't want SEL to be about a resource. We want it to be about a practice. If campuses have additional resources and want to purchase an additional, resource, then they can, some of them apply for other grants, or they have, they have a little bit of title funding that allows them to purchase another grant, and that's fine. We've approved a whole set of different vendors for their resources, but the resources that we provide additional support around are Harmony in elementary. It's free to everyone. And Random Acts of Kindness in middle school. And that's also free to everyone. And then Facing History in Ourselves, their advisory component is free as well. And we use that in our high schools. And so there are also other resources that we use as supplemental supports. EverFi has some SEL lessons that we use, and those are also free. And it's not called Teaching Tolerance anymore. I think it's Learning for Justice. That resource is also, we were able to pull some lessons from there, and that's also free. So what we're doing right now for next year, because of that challenge that, teachers have this other lesson to plan for, we are lifting from those resources, lifting their lessons and putting them in kind of PowerPoint presentation, teacher ready to go lessons, so that they don't have to plan yet another lesson. So that's a big lift that we're working on right now to prepare for next year, so that teachers can just kind of take it and go. I've heard of, I know, like when we visited Austin ISD, I thought it was a brilliant idea. What they did over the summer, they had all of their teachers in one of their schools go home for the summer. Everybody came back with 1 or 2 lessons around a topic that they felt that their school needed most, and the teachers came back with those lessons. At the beginning of the year, they had this whole bank of lessons for the entire school to utilize. So there are definitely free ways to provide that, the curricular support. And I think the biggest thing is to not make that the issue, the reason that we're not teaching these skills.
Great. And the next question is from Kachar Bradford, who actually had some questions about the resources that you have. And Kachar, do you want to answer a question?
Yes, so you all come up with if you search for SEL lessons or SEL resources, so that's really cool. I was able to look at your website. And some of the academic resources, of course, are password protected, but is there a site that you all kind of use as a reference, or anything that we can kind of look at how you started in your journey and your path forward, that we could explore within our district here?
Yeah. So are you not able to access the explicit skills lessons, and that's what you're trying to access? Is that?
I don't know. I was on one of the Dallas ISD websites, and it took me, and I was reading about all your work with social emotional learning.
Yeah.
And when I clicked on one of the links, it took to like employees only login. So I didn't know if maybe there was another site that was dedicated to the SEL work that we could look at and see some of your journey.
Yeah, I'm happy. We have another site, and I can share it back with Josie and Eric to share out with the group. Probably, if maybe one of the links that we have password protected could be our professional development, because teachers have to use their ID so that they can get credit for participation in PD, and then some of the curricular resources, but the curricular resources that we're using should be available. So I can I'll send some links to Eric and to Josie to get it out to the group. Thank you for asking me that.
No, thank you. Our team is very interested in doing this work, and they are apprehensive of purchasing something. They really do want it to be, homegrown. So we would love to see, and use you guys as a model.
Happy to share. Thank you.
Great. And it just occurred to me when Gutierrez asked the question, I had mentioned to you, Juany, is that I had been on your site a couple of weeks ago and was really impressed with it. That came from a conversation I had with Gutierrez, who said, if you want to know about SEL, take a look at the Dallas ISD stuff. It's very, very impressive.
Thank you. Thank
Great.
you.
And James, you had a resource that you were mentioning.
Yeah, so I know Castle has put together some free resources. I mean, they have some really great stuff. And a nice entry point is this guide that I dropped in the chat. A lot of teachers have just looked at that just to get started. Like, how do I embed some protocols within a lesson to get my kids to actually talk, so or engage with each other? So it's not a lot of heavy content. It's just some really easy turnkey ways that teachers can start embedding this in their work. And I use it as in professional learning with adults, some of these same strategies. So it's a nice, easy tool. I can also drop in, Dallas, you guys are doing some great work, by the way. I was able to go in a few days ago and look at some of the SharePoint or some of the Nearpod lessons, and those are open source. I can get in there pretty easily. You have some slides, all of this other really great stuff that you can just kind of see. So I'll drop that in the chat as well.
Perfect. Great. Other questions that you might have?
If it helps, I can share a slide. If I can share my screen really quick, and I'll just show a visual of what this framework looks like for Dallas ISD.
Perfect. It's open. You can share it.
Great. So the 4 approaches that I was speaking to, the explicit skills instruction, this is what it looks like. It's 45 minutes, and how it's built in. Campuses have that flexibility to determine when and how, whether it's a one-time lesson or divided out throughout the week. But then the integration into the climate and culture, again, just aligning SEL to existing systems and practices. And one of the things that I didn't mention earlier are just kind of the rules. Traditionally we use classroom rules. Teacher says this is what happens, and students, it's like the rules and consequences. And so we're really working at replacing rules with respect agreements, so that students and teachers develop these respect agreements. And then, a lot of our departments also have respect agreements as opposed to rules, again, focusing on relationship building. And then this is our set of standards that will, I was mentioning that we integrate these standards into the academic content. And I can share these slides with you all as well when I reply back to Eric and Josie. And then just, the family engagement, just different opportunities to engage parents, because the more consistent kids have the opportunity to practice these skills at home and at school, the more it becomes a part of their daily practice. And so we just feel like that's a critical component. Thought this slide might be helpful for you.
Great, perfect. Thank you. Other questions that our leaders have? How many of you have actually sort of thought about, other ways that you actually could be, or ways that you could be supporting your the emotional well-being, not only of your students, but also your staff? Gerald, you have, want to tell us a little bit about what you've been thinking about?
Yeah, so, of course, we firmly believe that until we address the social emotional needs of our students, as well as our adults, we're not going to be able to captivate the minds of our kids to even talk about learning loss. So we've actually partnered this year with the Community in Schools. Also, it's another resource for us and that's at every campus. So we receive grant money from another entity. And so that was one of the things we wanted to focus on. Everybody was looking at everything except the social emotional aspect of it. And I reminded them, just like the stewardess or flight attendants remind us, you got to take care of us before we can take care of others. And so that's one of the things we're doing. And we're also trying to do some more things with our teachers. We're venturing out into an employee clinic, working with one of our local hospitals, but we also want to have another psychologist in there as well for the mental aspect for our employees. So it's something separate from the school district, so that if they need some help, they can get some help.
Great. David Sullivan, I know that the community that you work in, the students and your staff have a number of different needs, and you also have sort of an innovative way that you sort of approach them, particularly the students that you've lost. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I was just going through some of the information that some of the reports that we've been receiving recently. One of the methods that we've had prior to having the pandemic process, or having that situation occur, we come from, or our community, we have a high poverty rate, and so we have just a high number of risk factors that we have historically dealt with our students. And so in recent years, we've just begun several initiatives, and one of those, we were able to initiate a Communities in Schools project. And so one of the outcomes of that, basically our first year that we've had that really fully implemented, was last year, just as the pandemic was starting. And so we're looking at some of the elements of at each of our sites of how the case managers that we have, because basically that project, we have a case manager in each building. And so we have 5 sites. And so each of those case managers have really made a significant impact on our students, and as well as our teachers, because of the connections that we've been able to make with our partners. We have a foundation that we've connected with in Oklahoma City, and they've provided so much for us in terms of resources for our teachers. Just, let's see, was it last week or the week before, we were able to provide care packages for all of our teachers. And so we were able to, they came in on a truck, and so we were out there picking, and they were pretty sizable boxes of food and other items. So we were able to deliver those care packages to the teachers, and they were really appreciative of it. It took a lot of work because it was a lot of moving but if I know Josie has been to our community and our district, and so we often have to wear a lot of hats. So that means, for me, it means getting out there and helping and doing whatever is needed. So I was out there lifting the boxes and moving them from the pickup point to each of the schools. And so, but that's the part that I like the most, is being able to get out there and not just sitting in the office, or, I really enjoy being out there and helping students as well as our teachers.
Great, thanks. Thank you, David. And I guess one of the things that we're hearing is that many of you have existing programs that you're already doing. And from what I can hear, Juany and both Josie, this is not to take away from existing program, what you're doing, but really to sort of augment everything that you're doing already.
Yes, absolutely. It shouldn't be one more thing, right? It's integrated, and it becomes like how we do what we do on a daily basis.
Great. And so we have a couple more minutes before I know that both of you have hard stops where you have to leave. Any final thoughts, insights, recommendations that you might want to leave with the fellows today?
I would just like to just to share that we have a new deputy superintendent this year coming from Colorado. She was the superintendent in Colorado, and she's now our deputy, and she's just amazing. And I'll tell you one of the things so she really just embodies SEL. They practice SEL in Denver, Colorado, and she really advocates for it here, and mostly through the SEL signature practices. If you're looking for one easy, quick way to just, get the buy-in and to get it started, start there. In every meeting and every PD and every interaction, ensure that there's always that welcoming opening to make sure that there are, and we have several, examples of like what those prompts might be to just get people talking and connecting to each other, to get to know each other, to build relationships. Engaging practices and always closing with an optimistic closing. It's about relationships first. And when we do that as adults, then we build relationships with kids and everyone wins, right? But I would definitely advocate that you start there with the signature practices.
Great, perfect. Josie, any last comments or thoughts that you might have?
Yes, and so did that sound familiar, Dr. Bing? Because we were just talking about those 3 signature practices. So thank you, Juany, for bringing that up. I think the only thing I want to add is, when you talk about this work, I don't believe it's business as usual. And I think that's one of the things when you're launching that people think, oh, and I'll speak from the employee side. They think it's the usual health and wellness. This is not your health and wellness apps or what the insurance provides you. This is about belonging. This is about taking care of your employees in new and different ways. It's really transformative thinking. It's changing the conversation. I loved what Superintendent Hudson just shared. Like, they're really thinking outside the box. We have to think outside the box. The times have changed. The needs have changed, and we have to take care of our people, because if not, we're going to continue to have burnout and turnover and all the things that aren't good for our kids. So be innovative and transformational.
Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your insights, your willingness to sort of share the lessons that you've learned, and hopefully here we will be inspired to really focus. Take what's currently going on in each of the districts and augmented by these things and other things. So really appreciate your input and your insight. And Juany, thank you for also sending Josie and I these links, and we'll also share them with the fellows later.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity. And you all are more than welcome to reach out to me at any time. And I'm happy to, continue this conversation and to help in any way that I can.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.